Hello and welcome to the RotoWire WNBA show, where we talk about fantasy basketball. We are back for 2025. I'm Jason Shebilske alongside Kirien Sprecher. Today, we'll discuss the top players available in fantasy drafts. We'll also break down the players into tiered rankings to help fantasy managers approach their drafts. And we'll break down news from the first week of training camp, which includes several injury updates. Those looking to subscribe to RotoWire can use the promo code ROTO15 at checkout for 15% off any RotoWire product. Not only can you stay up to date with WNBA news, projections, and articles, but I know I personally used it a lot this spring for fantasy baseball drafts and have already used it this year to prepare for fantasy football drafts. There isn't really an off season in fantasy sports anymore, and the promo code ROTO15 will give you the best deal on RotoWire's award-winning coverage. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just would say that like when you're looking at fantasy sports, like you should always take your gut instinct should be the final say, but you have to look around and see what other people are ranking players and see where they are so you can get ADPs because that's like the most important thing. So using that Roto 15, see what the experts are saying, see what other people are saying, and then obviously go off your own rankings, but you have to have a set understanding of what the rest of your league is going to do if you're going to win your league.
Absolutely. This year, especially just with the deluge of content upon us, like if you aren't preparing for a draft, I guarantee you that your league mates are. So you got to stay one step ahead, and Roto 15 is a great way to do it. During today's show, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments and we'll get them answered. If you ask live, we'll get them answered on the show, but we'll also be active in the comments afterward to provide any additional insight. So if you're watching this after the fact, feel free to chime in and we will get those answers to you. So starting off with the player rankings, even though the Aces were unable to three-peat last year, A'ja Wilson didn't miss a beat as she won her third MVP award and became the second player in league history to be named the MVP unanimously. For all the dominance that Wilson has displayed in the past, 2024 was somehow the best season of her career as she averaged a double-double with 26.9 points and 11.9 rebounds during the regular season. Fantasy managers shouldn't need much convincing to draft Wilson, but I'd argue that she's in a league of her own this year, even after the Aces lost Kelsey Plum and acquired Jewell Loyd during the offseason.
Yeah, no issues with Wilson at the number one spot. I feel like prior to last year, the previous couple of seasons, the one knock we had was like, well, the Aces blow so many teams out that like she just doesn't get enough playing time to like really accrue these crazy stat lines. Last year, the Aces dealt with some struggles, well-documented struggles, and that just forced Wilson to be even more of a baller. And like you said, the stats were just absolutely incredible. Being a multi-time MVP and then, increasing your points by 4 or 5 and increasing your rebounds, like that just doesn't happen. I expect something similar here. You mentioned Kelsey Plum leaving. They did bring in some, they brought in some help, and I think they'll still be a really good team. But I think they're going to have to rely on Wilson even more. And I expect her to be closer to last year's production than she was to the previous years. And if that's the case, she should be the clear number one. And if you're even thinking about anyone else at number 2, you're overthinking it in my book.
Absolutely. And for all of the success that the Aces had in 2023, 2022, after the 2023 campaign, they still took it personally that A'ja Wilson didn't win MVP. One voter even put her at number 4 in their voting. So she was on a mission this year. And like the crazy thing about A'ja Wilson is that just if she wants to, she can just turn something on and be the most dominant player in the league. She doesn't have to be night in and night out, given the dominance that the Aces have. But like she can just take control of a game, and it's really impressive to watch.
You were talking about the MVP voting, and looking at the NBA, you look at Nikola Jokic, and like he should have been the MVP again. His stats were even better than previous seasons, but it's some of that. It's the voter fatigue. Like I probably wouldn't have voted Wilson to win MVP last year if I had a vote. But I definitely wouldn't have had her 4th. Like she definitely would have slid in there at number 2. And so it's just the voter fatigue from the MVP voters that she wasn't in consideration or real consideration, but she should be the number 1 overall pick. Absolutely. The number 2 pick for me is also a no brainer. You also had your rankings. You had we're going off of Jason's rankings. He posted them on RotoWire. They'll also go to ESPN. We're going off that, and then I'll just give you some of my takes. So Jason has Caitlin Clark at number 2. I have no issues here. Obviously, they brought in some additions. They brought in DeWanna Bonner, Natasha Howard, Sophie Cunningham. Those are a lot of players that have taken a lot of shots in their careers, right? So maybe that means less usage for Clark. And you're like, oh, that means we got to knock her down the rankings. There's better players on this team. Let's be serious. This is Caitlin Clark's team. These players are coming in to make Caitlin Clark's life easier, not necessarily to take away from her production. I don't necessarily think, that she will lose some shots. There'll be games where she doesn't, shoot 20 times or whatever. But I think there are positives with adding these players too. You have easier shot attempts for Clark because the players are going to have to focus on DeWanna Bonner. They're going to have to stretch the floor and guard Sophie Cunningham 30 feet away from the basket. And then more assists. She's just playing with better players. They're going to make more of her passes. So she's going to have more assists. She's going to have easier shots. More floor spacing. I think this additions are good thing for statistics and a good thing for the Fever. I think Clark, bold take, maybe not so bold, but I think Clark becomes the first player in WNBA history to average at least 10 assists per game for a full season. And then if you add in, scoring 20 points, she averaged over a steal per game last year. She hits a bunch of threes. Even if Clark isn't scoring a bunch, her assists should keep her as a top 5 player, even when she isn't making, 5+ threes a game.
Absolutely. And one of the fun things about this first show, especially where we just get to talk about the top players, we aren't necessarily even talking about upside. We aren't talking about, oh, this player could do that. They could do that. Like maybe they're a valuable pick. Caitlin Clark is about as dominant as they come in the league. And same with A'ja Wilson, that Caitlin Clark is going to perform at a high level this year. We saw that last year, even with Kelsey Mitchell also in the backcourt, where even when Mitchell had her scoring opportunities, and she had a lot of them, Clark was simply just able to perform as a passer in a way that really complemented her scoring. So even if she wasn't taking those logo threes every game and just running up the scoreboard, she was able to contribute in other areas that really made her a strong fantasy asset, even as a rookie. And I think that fantasy managers for Paige Beckers this year, we'll talk about her in future shows, but they maybe shouldn't expect quite the same level of production out of Beckers this year, just because Clark really set the standard for what it is to perform as a rookie, and it was impressive to see.
Yeah, and I think what the biggest difference for me, even before Paige's injury, was Clark's passing ability. We can talk all day about her shooting ability. Clark's passing ability to me is what makes her a superstar, right? Like the threes are fun and it gets the crowd going, but the reason why she's going to the Fever are probably going to win multiple titles is because of her passing ability and her ability to make everyone around her better. You look at those Iowa teams, and there weren't very many WNBA players on those teams. Shout out Kate Martin, right? So Clark just has a knack for making everyone better. And now the best players in the WNBA, DeWanna Bonner, like one of the best players, one of the best scorers, they see this and they want to be a part of it. I will go on record, and I will say this forever, that Caitlin Clark's passing is her best attribute. And maybe some people think that's a hot take. I don't think that's a hot take. She's going to be the best passer in WNBA history by midway through this season, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And she saw 35.4 minutes per game last year while appearing in every regular season game.
Yep.
So she proved that she's capable of handling just an incredibly heavy workload. Even if she sees a few less minutes per night, I think that it could really just improve her overall season-long ability, because if the Fever are competitive and don't need her to play 35 minutes a game, she can get a little bit of rest and just be especially productive when they have really tough opponents.
And I totally agree with that. But I would just say the Fever are also in this weird, they're not the Liberty. They're not the Aces where they're like, we've been there, done that. Like, we're just going to try to get to the postseason, right? This is the season where the Fever are like, yeah, no, we got to be the number one team in the regular season and then be the number one team in the postseason. They still have something to prove with this news team. So yes, I think they'll blow some teams out. She'll get some rest. She'll get some time off the ball and let these other players handle the ball and run the offense. But she's good. She's going to get her production, and this is her team, and it's going to be a special season for the Fever.
Absolutely. New coach, new roster. The ingredients are all there for a fun season to watch. And rounding out my first tier of players in my rankings at number 3 is Breanna Stewart, who she's also showcased consistent dominance throughout her career. She had a quote unquote down year last season, but she still averaged 20.4 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, while also producing defensively and as a passer. She was an incredibly reliable fantasy option. At the top of the draft, fantasy managers can be a little bit nitpicky, and Stewart just didn't have quite as many of those really dominant performances as Wilson and Clark last year. Like the dominant performances I define as when you see like a 50-plus fantasy point performance in the box score, and it still happened pretty consistently with Stewart. But I just like the upside of Wilson and Clark slightly more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Stewie is fine at 3. Number 4, you have Collier. I would think about taking Collier over Stewart, simply because of age and where their teams are at. I think this is going to be Sabrina Ionescu's team before too long. Obviously, Stewie, she's 31 right now. She's got plenty of years left, but last season I feel like took a toll. They've got deep playoff runs the last couple of seasons. I'm also maybe just a little, have some PTSD from drafting Christian McCaffrey in fantasy football. When I see Breanna Stewart limited with a knee injury in training camp, maybe I'm just overreacting right now. Maybe that's our job to overreact. I could see her missing some time this season, getting those rest days, letting Sabrina run the offense. We're going to talk about Leonie Fevic and MJ Marine Johannes later in the show, 2 of my favorite players in the W. I think the Liberty are going to allow those players to get some extra run this season. I think Sabrina takes another step. So I'm totally fine with Stewie at 3. We're nitpicking here, right? This is the top 3 picks. So that knee injury plus the other players around her team make me kind of want to go Collier over Stewie at 3. Collier missed a lot of time a couple seasons ago. The last 2 seasons, ridiculously productive. One of the best players in the league. The Lynx took another step next year. I think Collier is the clear number 1 team on a clear super team in the Lynx. Whereas Stewie, like maybe some days she'll be the number 1. Maybe some days Sabrina will be the number 1. Maybe some days Jonquel Jones and Sabrina are ahead of Stewie on the roster or on the usage board. So that's the only reason why I'd probably take Collier at 3 and Stewie at 4.
Yeah, and that's very fair. I think even though it is technically tier 1, tier 2, I think it could almost go tier 1A is basically Asia Wilson, maybe Caitlin Clark, and then tier 1B is like kind of that Breanna Stewart through Sabrina Ionescu at 6 range, where if you're taking any of those players, I'm not really questioning things. I do have Arike Ogunbowale at number 5. Even though the Wings largely struggled last year, she put up career best marks in rebounds, assists, and steals, while also posting the second best mark of her career in points. She'll be joined by Paige Beckers in the backcourt this season, as we mentioned earlier, but I expect that Ogunbowale can maintain most of her production, pretty similar to what happened in Indiana with Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark last year. Mitchell wasn't quite the tier of player that Ogunbowale is, but Mitchell was still able to maintain most of her production, even with a really strong guard threat playing alongside of her. Even if Ogunbowale cedes some field goal attempts to Beckers, Ogunbowale is talented enough as a passer and should have more spacing available since there will be another strong scoring threat alongside of her.
Yeah, I think this is a very easy pick to make at 5. Obviously we talked about Sabrina. That's who you have at 6, and I like Sabrina. But I'm taking Ogunbowale at 5. And not just because her brother played for my alma mater, Wisconsin. You're talking about Paige Beckers coming in, and I quote tweeted whatever it is on Blue Sky. I feel like Blue Sky is maybe the better avenue to reach you guys for WNBA content than X. Maybe not. Whatever you guys want, let me know. I'll be posting WNBA content on both. But there was a video from Paige's debut where she's running down the court. She's standing at the top of the 3-point line, wide open, as 3 other players go to Arike Ogunbowale. And Paige just is like, oh, easy 3-pointer. like teams are not going to be able to do that to Ogunbowale. You read off the stats, career high numbers last year. That's with tons of bodies around her, and she's hitting ridiculous step back threes. I think Paige running with the offense a little more makes Arike be able to play off the ball, run off screens, get more open looks. And then when Arike has the ball, Paige is creating a lot of spacing. I think this is a great backcourt pairing. I don't know how good the wings are going to be, but I think Ogunbowale and Paige are going to score a lot of points, and there's going to be a lot of fun basketball to watch. And when that's happening, a lot of fantasy points are coming our way. We already talked about Sabrina a lot. That's who you have at 6. I have no issues here. Like I said, I like Sabrina at 6 more than I like Stewie at 3. That doesn't mean I would take Sabrina over Stewie, right? But just where their values are at. And that's what we were talking about. We're understanding what your league mates are going to do is super important. So yeah, I like Sabrina at 6. I think this is very easy. That she shot 45% from 3 in 2023. That's starting to look like an outlier. The rest of the seasons are closer to 34, 33%. But I also, when you watch her, you're not like, this is a 33% league average 3-point shooter. Sabrina is one of the best shooters in the league. I think eventually she's closer to that 40% mark consistently. I think that could happen this year. If that happens this year, she's probably going to be an easy top 6 fantasy player.
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm looking at the rankings and see Sabrina at 6, it's like, yeah, you're at number 6, but you're still getting a really strong pick. So even though it's awesome to get a player like A'ja Wilson or Caitlin Clark at the top of the draft, being at number 6 is a pretty good spot to be, because you can just take whoever falls to you out of the top 6, who I think are very similar, like fantasy potential. And then you're earlier in the next round to get that player. And some fantasy WNBA leagues are just 6 teams. Like, I know I did a mock draft with ESPN last week. It was only a 6-team mock draft. So to have Sabrina as a first round pick, and then to get a player like Alyssa Thomas or someone at number 7 is a pretty solid duo to have.
Yeah, I absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. And so just, I mean, spoiler alert, Thomas is number 7. But even with a new team, I think that she should still have a lot of opportunities for triple doubles with the Mercury. Now in 2023, she had a record-breaking number of triple doubles. She took a slight step back in 2024 with only 4. And for what it's worth, so Thomas leads the WNBA in career triple doubles with 15. The next highest mark over a career is 4. So even with her slight step back in 2024, she was still historically dominant. The good news for Thomas is that Brittany Griner is no longer in Phoenix, which should allow for increased rebounding opportunities. I think Thomas's overall upside will just depend on how much Satou Sabally is available this year. Sabally's main downfall in fantasy has been availability. So if Sabally is available, I think that Thomas's upside is maybe around like the 7 range or so. But if Sabally does wind up missing time, I think that Thomas could be even higher. Natasha Mack, who will take over as the center in Griner's absence, she had some decent production last year when Griner was out, but I think that Sabally will definitely be Thomas's top competition for production.
Yeah, and you said it with Thomas, right? Like, even when you quote unquote down year, it's a historic season. So that type of player has to be in the top 10. Number 7 seems fine with me. We're going to get into this next tier with 8 through 12. And I think that 8 through 12 tier is really well done. The organizing and splitting hairs between them, I feel like we can do. But that next tier is definitely who fantasy managers should be targeting. Forwards are especially important. Obviously, ESPN, the way that ESPN formats it. My only issue with Thomas is, you mentioned it, Sabally being there, new team. Not sure Kalea Copper is still there, so I'm not really sure what Phoenix is going to be. But obviously, if Phoenix is competing for a playoff spot, Alyssa Thomas is probably going to be a big reason why. And like you said, Sabally has only had 1 season in her career where she's played more than 17 games. So like not drafting Alyssa Thomas at 7 because Satou Sabally's there is like, okay, like, that's you're you're asking Sabally, you're expecting way too much of Sabally. If Sabaly's there and she has a great season, you're just going to have to chalk that up to, an outlier. I think Thomas is fine at 7. And I don't, you mentioned Natasha Mack, like there's no one who really has the skill set, even in the entire WNBA, that Alyssa Thomas has. So I don't think she really has to worry about her production being taken away too much. So, like I said, this next tier, 8 through 12, Jason, you had Arike Hamby at 8, and then followed with Jonquel Jones, Aaliyah Boston, Angel Reese, and Nneka Ogunbowale. Zero issues with this tier, as I said. Prioritizing forwards is paramount. Grabbing a player from this tier in round 2 was going to go a long way towards, having a balanced roster when your draft is done. But I disagree with this ordering a little bit. I'm going to take Reese first at 8, followed by Hamby, Ogunbowale, Jones, and then Boston. Boston, I love Boston. I just talked about how much I love the Fever. But you look at that starting lineup for Indy, and Boston is the 5th option. And then you bring Sophie Cunningham off the bench, and Sophie Cunningham's going to probably have more plays drawn up for her. That doesn't mean Boston isn't going to score. She's going to get dump offs. She's going to produce, but I just don't think she has as high of an upside as a player like Angel Reese, who is going to have the ball in her hands if we take training camps, stories seriously. She's added a 3-point shot, apparently, maybe cough, Ben Simmons. Let's not read too much into that. And then similar to Clark, you can just count on Angel Reese winning the rebounding title this year, barring injuries, right? So her rebounding gives her a very good floor. And then she's going to score some points. Her field goal percentage doesn't really hurt us there. So that bumps her up even more. And then if she's actually like an offensive hub, like they want her to be, we're talking about playing like a Nikola Jokic or an Asia Wilson, right? Where she's dribble handoffing, finding shooters in corners. If Angel Reese, that's the next step. I think Angel Reese is a star, but I think she could be a superstar, like rivaling Asia Wilson. No one is Asia Wilson, but I could see this season Angel Reese averaging 16, 12, and 4. And that would make her a top 8 pick, in my opinion, so I'm banking on a little bit of playmaking, but like I said, I think she has the path to grow, whereas the rest of these players in this group are just really solid, high floor players. I think Reese has the highest upside.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair assessment. As you can see, my jersey of the day is a Sky jersey, so I'm a big Angel Reese fan, living down here in Chicago. I don't think that there are many quote-unquote wrong picks that can be made early in fantasy WNBA drafts this year, unless you're trying to justify like a low tier 2 player or a tier 3 player instead of someone like Asia Wilson at the top of the draft. And for what it's worth, just a little peek behind the curtain here, the 5 players in tier 3 are separated in the rankings by just 38 ESPN fantasy points, especially over a 44-game season. That equates to less than a point per game. So they're basically the same potential. So I have no issues with an upside play here. I personally, just in fantasy in general, I tend to have a slight bias toward proven veteran talent over younger talent. But Reese is a player, she already proved her potential as a rookie. So if you're taking her over Hamby, I see no issues with that. And with Reese, with Hamby, actually, she had a breakout season last year, and she's been around the WNBA for a while. I think that Hamby will maintain a pretty good level of production this year, but it's also a little bit fair to say, well, I prefer Reese's 1 year of dominance over Hamby's 1 year of dominance. So I think that I don't think that you can go wrong with either of those picks there.
So just 2 things. I think you said there's no wrong picks. Totally agree with that, except you go guard.
Yeah.
And that's why this tier is so important, because you get one of these players and you get that balanced roster. If you go guard early, trust me, you're going to be pulling your hair out. If you have any hair left, I don't have much hair left anymore these days, but there's not many options left, and you have to fill out that ESPN roster. So grabbing a forward here is paramount. And then I forgot the other thing I was going to say, so we can just move on.
All right, sounds good. So my ninth ranked player is Jonquel Jones. She was named the finalist MVP for the Liberty last year. After a slightly down year in 2023, she bounced back last year, averaging 14.2 points, 9 rebounds. Availability also hasn't been a concern for her, as she hasn't missed more than 3 regular season games in any of the past 3 seasons. So Jones is one of those players. She maybe doesn't quite have as many of those like dominant 50 plus point fantasy 50 plus fantasy point performances as some of the other options. And that's partially due to the roster she's on. You may have noticed within the top 9, we have 3 players from the Liberty in Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones. I feel as though they're still rightfully ranked, but there can be a little bit more fluctuation on a
Yes.
night to night basis depending on their opponent. Maybe some games they're going more front court heavy, some games they're relying more on Ionescu. But Jones is still a solid top 10, top 11 player, I would say for sure.
Yes, absolutely. The fluctuation is the exact point. You don't overreact when Stewart goes 2 for 10 and scores 9 points in game one, because there's gonna be a 35-point game, right? And similar to Jonquel Jones, the start of her Liberty career, she started off slow, but she's been, I'm not going to say MVP-esque, but she's been closer to that type of player than she was at the beginning of her Liberty career. So yeah, like you said, you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to get 12 points and 10 rebounds every night from Jonquel, but you can count at the end of the season she's probably going to average 14 and 8 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it all averages out, but that fluctuation is big. I also remembered what I was going to say. You were talking about prioritizing veteran players. Absolutely correct. We need to stress the importance that last year the Clark and the Angel Reese draft, that is an outlier, folks. Don't go into this draft being like, oh, I'm going to load up on rookies. Rookies are king. Like, no, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are outliers and very, very special players. Paige Beckers has a chance to be on that list. There might be 1 or 2 other rookies that have, maybe a handful of rookies that have fantasy relevance throughout the season. But aside from Paige Beckers, there might only be 1 or 2 players that are relevant all season long. Is that a fair statement to say?
I think so. I think that Paige Beckers is probably the safest option of the rookies. But then you get into even territory like Dominique Malanga. Malanga's skill set is undeniable. She has showcased so much dominance overseas. The problem is, I think that she might play in Eurobasket a little bit this year, which could limit her availability for fantasy purposes. So that's one of the things that's just kind of bringing her down my rankings a little bit. Same with Sonia Citrone from the Mystics. I think that in the wake of Georgia Amore's injury, that Citrone's upside is maybe a little bit higher than it would have been otherwise. But really, you have Beckers, and then you have a few question marks behind her, at least for the first year of their career.
Yeah, and you're talking about Dominique. I also think there's just a lot of talent in that front court. So, it might take a while for her to develop into the player that we think she can be. I one of my first years at RotoWire, I saw a video of her doing like a little drop step dunk when she was like 15 or 16. And so it's pretty awesome that she's now in the WNBA, but still, like, I'm going to pump the brakes here. Like, it's going to take her longer to adjust to the WNBA than it took Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. Like, even Clark and Reese had their struggles, right? But I just want to stress that those Clark and Reese are outliers, and we can't count on that to happen every season, except for the Paige Beckers, the Juju Watkins. Like, those players, I believe, are coming in ready to perform. So we got a little sidetracked there with rookie talk, but going back to the tiered list. Aaliyah Boston comes in at 10. We just talked about it. I love Boston's potential, especially paired with Clark long-term. But this starting lineup, Natasha Howard, DeWanna Bonner, Clark, Mitchell, Boston's the 5th option here. I think she's going to accumulate stats on a really good team. And I think she's going to have a high floor and be a consistent producer. But I just would not take her ahead of Angel Reese simply because I think Reese has a way higher upside.
Yeah, and that's very fair. I think that Indiana will be kind of a New York light situation in terms of how the workload is distributed. I think that there will be nights where Boston is that maybe fifth option in the starting lineup. I think there will be nights where she's more like number 2 or number 3 behind Caitlin Clark. So I think that it's just a matter of consistency and upside. And I don't disagree with Reese's upside. You already touched on her potential, but I'll just echo she has plenty of upside heading into 2025. I believe that the reasoning for me putting her at number 11 hinges on the fact that Camila Cardoso and Elizabeth Williams should be healthy to start the season. So that could slightly detract from Reese's production on certain nights. But Reese should still be heavily involved for the Sky, who revamped their roster during the offseason after missing the playoffs last year. So I think that there will be plenty of games in which the Sky are well within the realm of winning the game, and Reese will be out there for sure.
Yeah, and Cardoso being healthy and Elizabeth Williams being healthy are totally fine. Like hindrances to why you would want to drop her. And I told like I said, we're splitting hairs here. Maybe I'm buying too much into the training camp talk, but I think Reese, as much as people wanted to make fun of her scoring and whatever, the Sky were a decent team. They were 10 games below 500. Calling them a decent team is probably a stretch, but they were fighting for that final playing spot. They beat the Fever in a really, really big game. I just think Reese is ready to take another step forward and be more of a playmaker. And I think if she's doesn't take that next step as a playmaker, yeah, she's more towards that 11, 12, 13 range. But if she starts averaging, couple assists per game, 4 assists per game, that's where I am expecting that difference to be made up. Coming in at 12, we have Nneka Ogunbowale. This great player. She's getting up there in age. And then there's questions about like how Seattle's going to look post Lloyd. But again, like we were talking about, Nneka has a history of strong production. This is a very safe play. Take Nneka over taking Kelsey Mitchell or, taking a guard in this range. Having that forward that plays consistent games and gives you consistent production is huge at this spot, and why this tier 3 is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you touched on, Nneka's getting a little bit up there in age. You might have a few more inconsistent performances sprinkled in, but like at number 13 through 16 in the rankings are Jewel Lloyd, Kelsey Plum, Kalia Copper, and Jackie Young, who are all really strong options. But number 1, they're all guards. So for fantasy purposes, guards are maybe a little bit less valuable. And also with Lloyd and Plum especially, you have the factor that they'll be playing for new teams. Kalia Copper, there's a lot of new talent around her. So there's just slightly more risk with those players than you might see in a different season. Whereas the Storm, they lost Lloyd, but I think that Nneka Ogunbowale has proven throughout her career who she is as a player, and that talent should still show through.
Yeah, and maybe we should just specify and tell the viewers what the ESPN formatting is. It's 2 guards, 3 forwards, and then a center.
Three forward / center spots. So you can load up on all centers or all forwards.
Okay. Cool. I didn't know if there was. So you start 5 players, 2 guards, and then 3 forward centers.
And 1 utility.
And then 1 utility. So yeah, exactly. Yes, it's so much more important. You're starting 1 more player at a forward spot than you are at guard spot. So if you have 4 guards and 4 forwards, that's just the math just doesn't work out there. So you should probably lean heavier onto the forward side. Even though all those guards you mentioned are probably going to end up with more points scored than Nneka, and if that happens, you could still justify Nneka being the better play because the drop off from Nneka to the next forward is going to be so big. So we're getting into the minutia here. Obviously it can come both ways, but we're just saying prioritize forwards, and Nneka is really where that drop off comes. And there's going to be a lot of guards available in that 15 range. So go forward early and then guard late.
Absolutely. Then getting into just some of the news from the last few days, the start of training camp is always very exciting, but we unfortunately got some discouraging injury updates over the first week, including ACL injuries for Georgia Amore and Katie Lou Samuelson, and it sounds as though Benijah Laney Hamilton will also miss the entire 2025 season. I was really excited to watch all of these players this season, but we'll unfortunately have to wait until 2026 to see them back in action. Kirien, who do you think are some players that could step up in their absences?
So you mentioned Sonia. I think Citrone, I think she has the highest upside of any rookie not named Paige Beckers this season. Like I said, Dominique, I think could be a superstar in the future, but it's going to take. She hasn't played against WNBA competition consistently ever in her career, so it's going to take some time. Sonia looked fantastic in her preseason debut. There's going to be a lot of opportunity on a really bad team. Anything could happen. The Mystics being good is probably not one of them, though, folks. I'm sorry. But on a team like that, there's plenty of room for fantasy production. So Sonia would be my player to step up in that situation. And then you're talking about Laney Hamilton. Leonie Fibish was starting in the finals last year. She is a fantastic defender. You probably don't remember this, but one of our preseason shows last year, I related Fibish to, do you remember what player I said?
I don't think so.
Elena Del Don. And I was kind of like, well, that was probably a bit of a stretch, but it's not like she could have that type of impact or that type of fantasy impact, be an MVP candidate, lead a team to a championship. But she is a great defender. She can shoot the ball. She can pass the ball. She knows how to rotate. She is a connector, as people that follow NBA or follow basketball like to say. She's a connector. No matter who she's on the court with, whether Stewie's having a good game, Sabrina's having a good game, Jonquel's having a good game, Fibish will play good defense and she'll play within the offense or however the team is going. When any of those three goes out with an injury, like we said, those are all probably top 10 picks in your draft. Fibish is the player you're going to want to roster. She's going to play heavy minutes. She's going to accrue stats and all sorts of different things. And then MJ Marine, she's Caitlin Clark light. Like, let's just be honest. She shoots from step back threes, fadeaway threes. She's one of the most fun players to watch. The production is not always there. So I'm not saying go out and draft MJ, but Fibish is definitely the player to have. But both of those players are great options for the Liberty, and it also shows you why they have 3 top 10 fantasy picks, but they also have a super deep bench, and another reason why they're going to be one of the best teams this season.
Absolutely. And even though the Liberty lost Courtney Vandersloot during the offseason, they acquired Natasha Cloud. So I think that will help with their guards in the backcourt. But I do agree that Leonie Fibish should have plenty of opportunities to get involved. Same with Marine Johannes. I think that she'll probably come off the bench for them. But in the past, she's proven to be she can just vitalize a team off the bench. If they're having a slow start, she comes in, makes a few threes, and they're right back in it. With Johannes, kind of similar to what I touched on with Malanga, I think that there's a chance that she plays overseas for a bit at some point during the season. So that's one of the bigger risks that you run into just with WNBA players in general. And then in place of Katie Lou Samuelson in Seattle.
Real quick, before we move on, this just shows you how important Fibish is to a title winning team. In the series against the Lynx, these are the minutes played by Fibish in the finals. 38 minutes in game 1, 30 minutes in game 2, 34 minutes in game 3, 36 minutes in game 4, and 40 minutes in the closeout game 5. Like, she's playing more minutes than anyone else on this team. That doesn't mean she's going to produce like that, but opportunity is king. When you're on the court, you're going to accrue stats just by being out there, unless you're Tony Snell. So, like I said, I'm not saying Fibish is a star, but she's a star in her role. And when she's getting 35 plus minutes, she's a great fantasy option that you can essentially get for free because she's going to be on the waiver wire.
Absolutely. This year, I think she's more of a mid-round pick. I have her, I believe, at number 44 in my rankings.
All right, then the consensus picking up, and this is exactly why you have to check out ADPs before you make bold statements like that, Kirien.
Yeah, and but yeah, I think that she'll have plenty of opportunities. I think that there'll be time in the Liberty
I guess
rotation for
I
her.
guess with Lainey Hamilton out, yes, you definitely should be drafting her and starting her because that would be worthy. So that makes total sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Then in Seattle, just kind of touching on a few players who could step up. Alicia Clark. Clark is one of those players. She tends to see pretty consistent minutes, but just doesn't have a lot of like fantasy production. At least that was the case in Las Vegas. Mackenzie Holmes, she was hurt last year, but she'll be back. And Lexi Brown, she said at the start of training camp that she's feeling really healthy this year. So Brown has missed a lot of time due to Crohn's disease over the past few seasons. She says that she's healthy. I'm still approaching it with a little bit of caution, but if she is able to play most of the season, I think Lexi Brown is someone who could really step up.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Like you said, the illness that you just got to chalk that up to bad luck. And when she's on the court, she's a strong fantasy producer, and definitely worth stepping up with these early season injuries.
Absolutely. And that does it for today's show. But we'll be back on Mondays and Fridays throughout the WNBA season. So be sure to join us this Friday at 1 o'clock Central as we continue to break down draft strategy for this year. We know that drafts are happening throughout the coming days and weeks. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them either in the comments on the video, reach out to us on social media. I'm at Jason Shebilske. He's at Kirien Sprecher RW. And we're looking forward to doing this again this year.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, guys, Blue Sky X, if you follow me, you ask a question, I will answer. I'm not very active, but I need to be more active. So I'm opening the forum, ask whatever you want. Basketball related, hopefully only questions. Basketball related only questions, hopefully. And I'll answer that. I need to be more active. And like I said, like Blue Sky, maybe that's the better avenue to reach WNBA fans. Maybe it's X, whatever. Follow me, ask questions. Excited for another fun season. The W is growing in popularity, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. So looking forward to another great season, Jason.
Yeah, should be a fun one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you Friday at 1 Central. See ya.